A Toadstool's Treasures, Journey into the Fascinating World of Fungi. Story by Jason Wilson. Illustrations by Hannah Nico Weaver. Narrated by Iona McQueen. Meet Phoebe and Molly. They are best friends and play together almost every day at school. This day was special because Molly was finally going to sleep over at Phoebe's house for the very first time. Phoebe lived on a small farm in the country, and Molly had never been on a farm before. She was excited, but also a little nervous. How would life at Phoebe's house be different from what she knew? "Here we are," Phoebe said. Molly looked around, confused. "Where? I don't see anything." "This path leads to my house. Come on!" Phoebe exclaimed as she began running down the path. Molly chased after her. Upon reaching Phoebe's house, they threw down their backpacks and began playing outside. And Molly and Phoebe played and played and played until eventually Molly began to think about her home. She thought about how far she was from her parents and her cats, who she loved a lot. She wondered what they were doing right now. As Molly thought about home, she began to feel very sad. Phoebe noticed that Molly seemed unhappy. "What's wrong?" she asked Molly. "I miss my home, and my cats, and my parents," Molly replied sullenly. Phoebe had an idea to cheer up her friend. She grabbed Molly by the hand and said, "I want to show you something. Come with me." Phoebe took her friend to a small field near her house and pointed down towards the grass. There was a ring of white mushrooms growing in a circle. "Look, it's a fairy ring," Phoebe said. "My mum said that fairy rings are magical. You should make a wish." Molly furrowed her brow. "I hate mushrooms. They're gross." "That's not true. Mushrooms are really neat. I collect them with my parents all the time." "You touch them? What do you collect them for?" Molly asked, disgusted. "We eat them. Some of them at least. Some will make you sick if you eat them, so we have to learn a lot about the mushrooms that grow around here. But a lot of them are really tasty. I heard my mum say that we are going to eat mushroom stew for dinner tonight, so you'll get to go foraging with us later. That'll be lots of fun." Gross! I never want to eat a fungus." As she thought about the fact that she would have to eat yucky mushroom stew, she began to grow annoyed. "Does everything have to be different here? Even the food is different." She began to feel even more homesick. She looked down at one of the mushrooms in the fairy ring and furrowed her brow. In her anger, she kicked the mushroom across the grass, muttering to herself, "I hate mushrooms." Suddenly, the strangest thing happened. As Molly went to stomp on another mushroom, a big purple cloud of dust shot up from the ground, making Molly and Phoebe sneeze and cough, and a muffled voice came from the grass underneath Molly's foot. "Hey, what's the big deal?" the voice said. Molly was shocked and confused. Where was the source of this strange voice? "Why are you stomping on my friends?" the voice asked. Astonished, Molly looked down and discovered that a mushroom was alive and looking straight up at her. But this mushroom was very different from the others, and it had not been there before. "My name is Brother Toadstool. I help keep watch over my fungal friends around here. And just so you know, stomping on us won't make us go away," they said. Molly and Phoebe couldn't believe what they were seeing. A talking mushroom! Brother Toadstool continued. "Just like trees have above-ground parts like the trunk, stems and leaves, and underground parts like the roots, These mushrooms also have above ground and underground parts. The real body of a fungus is actually underground. That's just one of the clever ways we survive in the world. In fact, every time you kick us around, our spores burst into the air and are carried away by the wind. Spores? That's what the purple dust was when you appeared. Neat! I'll make spore prints with my parents, Phoebe exclaimed. Molly crossed her arms and frowned. Yes, spores are kind of like seeds. When spores find a home, they begin to grow into another fungus, and the circle of the mushroom life continues. But what good is fungus? You're gross, Molly exclaimed. Perhaps I can show you. Follow me, Brother Toadstool urged. Molly crossed her arms again and remained in place as Phoebe began chasing after the talking mushroom. Come on, Molly! It'll be an adventure, Phoebe called out as she followed Brother Toadstool. Brother Toadstool led Phoebe and Molly into a tunnel that went deep down into the ground. As they climbed into the tunnel, they found themselves getting smaller and smaller and smaller. This is where we will venture off trail, Brother Toadstool exclaimed as he made his way through the soil wall of the tunnel. Molly and Phoebe followed suit, taking a moment here and there to look around and marvel at this new yet familiar landscape. We're the size of ants! Phoebe shouted joyfully. It's so dark, Molly muttered nervously. Right this way, said Brother Toadstool. We'll get some help from the nematodes. Nematodes? Molly and Phoebe asked, looking at each other curiously. Oh, yes. The nematodes are great at finding what we are after, the mushroom said as it disappeared ahead of the girls. Hey, where did he go? Asked Molly. Suddenly, Brother Toadstool reappeared, mounting on a wiggling. Is that a worm? Molly said nervously. Brother Toadstool smirked. Not a worm, a nematode. Now hop on it. It will take us to our next stop. They rode the nematode until it approached a giant series of plant roots. Whoa, Phoebe said as her jaw hung open while she looked around. Fungus does a lot underground that most people never notice. Did you know that a lot of fungi and plants work together to find food and water? In front of them was fungus with a magnifying glass, examining what looked like small rocks. They seemed to be sweating a sticky goo as they worked. Meet Arby. She lives here on the plant's roots and is helping this plant find special nutrients like phosphorus. In exchange, the plant gives Arby some food and water. It's a win-win situation. Most of the time. Hi, Arby, Phoebe exclaimed, waving at her new friend. Huh? Oh, hello. Good day. Startled, Arby dropped her magnifying glass into a nearby glob of sticky, sweaty goo. Oh dear, look what I've done now. Find anything good today, Arby? Asked Brother Toadstool. Oh yes, always lots to find, lots to do. Busy, 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 you know, Arby replied while tugging on her magnifying glass, pulling it out of the sticky goo. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm quite busy. What is that goo? Molly suddenly blurted out, unable to contain her interest any longer. Goo, Arby exclaimed. Goo, I beg your pardon. Brother Toadstool began to laugh. I think what she meant is soil glue. Arby and the other fungi like her produce a substance called glomalin, which helps keep the soil and its nutrients stuck in place so that they don't wash away. But that's not all Arby does. Arby may not look like much of a fighter, but she helps protect these plant roots from predators that want to feed on them like these nematodes. Wow, there really is a lot going on underground, said Phoebe. Big deal, Molly replied, crossing her arms once again, unimpressed. It is a big deal, replied Brother Toadstool. They made their way back to the tunnel and climbed up toward the surface. As they climbed, they began to grow until they were back to their normal size once again. Right this way, Brother Toadstool said as he made his way toward the nearby forest. As they entered the forest, another odd thing started happening. The further they journeyed into the woods, the more they became surrounded with fallen branches, leaves, pine needles, and dead trees. There were hardly any plants visible on the forest floor anymore, and it was starting to get hard to move around. What happened to the forest? Cried Phoebe. My favourite flowers used to grow right here in this spot. Now there are just sticks everywhere. You're right. All sorts of plants used to grow here. Many fungi are decomposers, or saprophytes. They break down things like wood, leaves, and other debris to provide nutrients to new plants, animals, and mushrooms. But without fungi, the forest floor is getting covered in litter, smothering everything underneath. All that wooden debris keep new plants from finding light or gaining access to nutrients. Without light or nutrients, plants cannot grow. Except for trees, Molly exclaimed, feeling victorious. The trees are tall and their roots are deep. Not so fast, said Brother Toadstool. These trees will have problems of their own. If their wood does not compose, the trees will eventually lose all of their soil and nutrients. Not only that, but all of this wood piling up in the forest creates another big problem that affects the trees and all other wildlife in the forest. Forest fires. You see, what a lot of people don't realise is that we work hand in hand with forest fires to help keep our forests healthy. Without fungi, there would be too much wood on the forest floor, and when the forest fires come, they would burn too hot and too big, leading to giant fires that threaten the entire forest. All environments in nature, whether forests, meadows, rivers, or even the soil beneath your feet, are part of a complex web of life. If you pull something away or change something, it can have unexpected and sometimes scary consequences. Whether you realise it or not, without fungi, you might not be able to enjoy your favourite plants or animals anymore, and life as you know it would be very, very different. Molly thought for a moment, reflecting on everything they had experienced and learned from Brother Toadstool so far. I never thought about that before, Molly said. She uncrossed her arms and looked down at the ground. She never knew that fungi were so crucial to other types of life, like plants and animals. Another one of the amazing things that fungi can do is help clean the environment. Come see! Brother Toadstool grabbed Phoebe and Molly by the hand, and they shrank down to the size of their mushroom friend. They walked across a log in a river toward a group of grey mushrooms growing out of the wood. As Molly looked down into the water, she noticed things in the water that she did not see before when she was bigger. Why does the water look so different? She said. Now that you're smaller, you can see the pollution in the water, like oils and chemicals that run off from nearby lands into the stream, Brother Toadstool replied. Our fungi friends growing on this log are catching the pollution and cleaning up the water as it flows downstream. And it's not just the rivers where fungi are working hard to clean things up. This happens in the soil and even the air. Did you know that some fungi can even break down certain types of plastics? Brother Toadstool continued to lead the girls through the forest. Only now, the forest was back to its familiar self, covered in plants, leaves, and mushrooms. They led the girls across the log to the other side of the river, where the girls grew back to their original size. Whoa! Look at that mushroom! Molly exclaimed. It's beautiful! She ran toward a bright blue mushroom peeking out from underneath a pile of leaves. "That is my good friend Leaky Larry Indigo." "Good day, Larry," they called out. The blue mushroom stirred, waking from a nap. "Whoa, brother and sisters, righteous! I've never been able to talk to humans before. This is totally wild," Leaky Larry exclaimed. "Did you know that I've been used for thousands of years to dye clothes? I've also been told I'm pretty tasty too, though I wouldn't know." "I never knew there were mushrooms as pretty as you before," Molly said. "Oh, well, thanks," Larry replied, blushing. "Mushrooms can come in all sorts of wonderful colours, which humans have used to dye clothes and other textiles. Let me show you what else fungi do. Just follow these shelf mushrooms into this tree." "Oh, here we go again," Molly said, following Brother Toadstool and Phoebe into the tree. "Step into my laboratory," Brother Toadstool called out, now wearing a lab coat. "Did you know that many life-saving medicines have been discovered from fungi?" "Really?" asked Molly. "I know that my grandmother drinks mushroom tea when she gets sick," Phoebe commented. "It tastes horrible. Mushrooms produce all sorts of different chemicals. Some essential medicines, like antibiotics, have been found in moulds that grow on rotten fruit. Who knows what amazing medicines might still be waiting to be discovered in other types of fungi. That's one reason why it is essential that we take care of our fungi friends. We don't know what new life-saving medicines might be discovered next. If we don't take care of our friends in nature, we might lose them forever, losing those medicines with them. And, beyond medicines, fungi can be used to make all sorts of things, like paper." "I thought paper came from trees," Molly said. "Well, paper can come from trees, but it can also be made from mushrooms. Also, mushroom can be great foods, and it's not just humans that like munching on mushrooms. Did you know that many rodents like mice, rats, and squirrels rely on mushrooms for up to 90% of their diets? Many rodents will dig up underground mushrooms called truffles or find meaty mushrooms above ground to nibble on throughout the day. Bigger prey like owls, hawks, and snakes then eat those rodents and rely on them to survive. So ultimately, fungi are helping support this web of life that connects to all sorts of different creatures." "Wow, I didn't know that other animals ate mushrooms," Phoebe said excitedly. Molly looked up into the trees. "Owls are my favourite animal," she said. "I never knew mushrooms were so important for owls too." She looked over at Brother Toadstool and smiled. "I'm really sorry that I was so mean to you. You're not gross, and I promise that from now on I will appreciate mushrooms and fungi more." Molly held out her hand to Brother Toadstool. "Do you forgive me?" "Of course," said Brother Toadstool. "Don't worry, a lot of people don't realise how important we are, but that's why I work so hard to take care of my friends. You sure have taught me a lot today. I'll never look at mushrooms quite the same way again. Thank you," Molly said, before hugging Brother Toadstool. "You are quite welcome," replied Brother Toadstool. "It has been my pleasure." "Phoebe! Molly!" A voice called from Phoebe's house. "Where are you?" "It's my mum," Phoebe said. Phoebe looked back and waved towards her mum. "Hey, Mum!" she shouted. "We're over here!" When Molly turned to say goodbye, she noticed that Brother Toadstool had already left, as mysteriously as he had appeared, and all that was left was a normal, but certainly not dull, mushroom in his place. "He's gone?" Phoebe said softly. "Do you think we will ever see him again?" Molly asked. "I don't know, but I sure hope so," Phoebe replied. "There you girls are," Phoebe's mum said as she approached. "What have you been doing?" "We've had the best adventure," Phoebe exclaimed. "Well, I can't wait to hear about it. You can tell me all about it while we go mushroom hunting. Molly, do you like mushrooms? Phoebe's mum asked Molly. Yes, ma'am. I do now. I can't wait to go mushroom hunting, Molly replied enthusiastically. Well, that's great. We make the best wild chanterelle mushroom stew, so you were in for a treat, Phoebe's mum said. But before we get started, we need to review the rules of mushroom hunting. Phoebe's dad walked up, carrying several baskets. Who's ready to hunt for some mushrooms? He yelled as he approached. Mum's giving us the mushroom hunting talk again, Phoebe said, rolling her eyes. And what an important talk it is. Please don't let me interrupt, Phoebe's dad said, grinning. As I was saying, Phoebe's mum said, first, we never eat anything we can't identify. Mushrooms are tasty, but some can make us very sick if we aren't careful. Second, once we have identified them, we always cook the mushrooms before we eat them. Third, we always tap the cap of the mushroom before collecting it to spread its spores. We like to help ensure that our fungi friends can spread and grow other places. Fourth, we only take what is above ground. We want always to leave the bottom of the mushroom behind and make sure. Because the body of the mushroom is actually underground, Molly said proudly, interrupting Phoebe's mum. That's right, Molly, Phoebe's mum said. I guess you girls already know your stuff, huh? Well, let's get going then. Phoebe, can you show Molly what to look out for? Sure thing, Phoebe exclaimed. Come on, follow me. Phoebe ran toward the forest, with Molly following after her. Phoebe and Molly spent the rest of the afternoon with Phoebe's parents in the forest hunting for wild mushrooms to eat for dinner. As they collected mushrooms in their basket, Molly and Phoebe thought about the things they had learned from Brother Toadstool. They imagined what all of the mushrooms they were finding might say to them if they could talk once again. By the time they were done, Molly had collected almost every type of mushroom she could find. Excited to examine them further when they would get back to Phoebe's house. Okay, girls, Phoebe's dad said, let's look at your baskets. Wow, Molly, you found a lot of mushrooms, didn't you? I've never noticed so many different types of mushrooms before, Molly replied. Phoebe, will you show Molly how to make spore prints like we do when we want to identify new mushrooms? Sure thing, it'll be fun, Phoebe said. What's a spore print? Molly asked. It's really neat. You just take the cap off a mushroom and put it on a piece of paper, and the spores fall on the paper. You can even make art out of it if you're creative. There can be all sorts of different colours. One time I found a mushroom that had orange spores, but a lot of the times they're white, brown, or a kind of rusty coloured. Cool, Molly replied. Let's do it. And later that evening, with bellies full of delicious mushroom stew, Molly and Phoebe quickly drifted off to sleep. The next morning, Molly woke up to the familiar voices of her parents coming from a nearby room. It was at this moment that Molly suddenly realised that she had totally forgotten about how homesick she was the day before and how much she missed her parents and her cats. Now she didn't feel sad at all. Instead, she felt very happy. She'd gotten through her first sleepover and she got to experience and learn all sorts of new things. Now, she couldn't wait to tell her parents about her adventures in the fun and fascinating world of fungi. The end. For more fungi content, visit www.toadstoolstreasures.com to find lesson plans, educational content, games, and more.